Welcome to Bible Fiber, where we explore the textures and shades of the biblical tapestry. I'm Shelley Neese, president of the Jerusalem Connection, a Christian organization dedicated to sharing the stories of Israel's people, both ancient and modern. Bible Fiber is currently in a one-year sprint through the foundational narratives of the Torah. We follow the weekly Jewish reading calendar so that our Sunday lunch conversations might coincide with Shabbat tables on Saturday. This week's portion is Beshalach, which translates to when he sent. The name comes from the opening verse, when Pharaoh let the people go. After 10 rounds of increasingly destructive plagues, Pharaoh finally agreed to release the Israelites. Exodus 14 first provides a list of place names describing the winding journey of their escape. This was not a direct march from Egypt to Canaan. It was a zigzagging, circuitous route. For modern scholars and archaeologists, this path is almost impossible to retrace with certainty, since many place names have faded from historical memory. Therefore, the exact route of the Exodus journey remains a mystery. Pharaoh initially believed the Israelites were leaving for a temporary religious observance. Throughout the plague narrative, Moses consistently framed the request as a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices. He told Pharaoh, "The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us now go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, so that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God." When Pharaoh finally relented, he told Moses and Aaron to go serve the Lord as you have said. By using that specific phrasing, Pharaoh was holding on to the hope that the departure was a temporary concession. It was actually a direct command from God that Moses and Aaron present their position to Pharaoh as a short pilgrimage and not a full-blown escape. By asking for a minor concession rather than total emancipation, Moses forced Pharaoh to reveal the depth of his cruelty. He was refusing to even grant a short religious break for his laborers. Strategically, the request for 3 days also functioned to give the Israelites a head start on their escape. Since Pharaoh expected the Israelites to return, their continued movement on the 4th day aroused his suspicion. His informants, who must have tracked the Israelites, reported back that they were wandering aimlessly in the land, and that the wilderness has closed in on them. This perception, fueled by the deadline passing without a turnaround, prompted him to mobilize his army and go after the Israelites. There are 2 white lies in the Exodus narrative. Earlier, the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, defied Pharaoh's genocidal decree. When questioned as to why they had not killed the Hebrew boys, they claimed the women were too vigorous and gave birth before a midwife could arrive. This was a clear instance of righteous deception. They lied to an oppressor to shield the lives of innocent children. Moses and Aaron's 3-day request follows the same ethical logic. In a state of war or extreme oppression, the white lie becomes a tool of holy resistance. Pharaoh held the Israelites in cruel bondage. That means he forfeited his moral right to the truth. And just as the midwife's deception was blessed by God because it prioritized the preservation of life, Moses' strategic framing of the Exodus served a higher justice. In fact, the purpose of a righteous white lie is a central theme in Corrie ten Boom's book, The Hiding Place. When Corrie's family hid Jewish refugees during the Nazi occupation, she and her sister at first agonized over the amount of deception they needed to live out in order to save the Jewish people hiding in their home. But Corrie and her family knew the Bible, and they drew on these biblical precedents to justify their actions to the Gestapo. They determined that when an authority figure uses their power to commit murder, they lose their moral claim to the truth. For the ten Booms, as for Moses, these deceptions were not flaws of characters, but holy resistance. Once Pharaoh realized the Israelites were not returning, his regret was instant. He viewed the loss of his workforce as an economic catastrophe, and he mobilized his army. The text says he took 600 picked chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt. As the superpower of the day, Egypt possessed military technology and size that few other nations could match. Certainly, a motley crew of freed slaves on foot had no chance against the horse-drawn chariots. The Israelites reached the edge of the sea only to see the dust clouds of those chariots at their heels. Their fear was visceral. With the Egyptian king behind them and the water in front, the people turned on Moses, and they asked him, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?" Moses instructed the people to stand still, but God challenged this, and he said, "Why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward." As the people prepared to move into the water, the pillar of cloud which had been leading them shifted its position. It moved from the front of the camp to the rear, stationing itself as a physical barrier between the army of Egypt and the people of Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the Egyptians, while providing light to the Israelites, ensuring the two groups did not come into contact. Under this divine protection, Moses stretched out his hand, and God drove the sea back with a strong east wind. The waters were divided, and the Israelites walked through on dry land. The scene was striking. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, the floods stood up in a heap, and the deeps congealed in the heart of the sea. They walked with a wall of water on their left and a wall on their right, shielded from the sea by a miracle and from their enemies by the cloud. The previous plagues had demonstrated God's dominance over the gods of Egypt, but this final miracle targeted their military might. The Egyptian army followed into the seabed, but their sophisticated chariots became their undoing. The Lord clogged their chariot wheels so that they turned with difficulty. The heavy wheels got stuck in the mud and mire, throwing the army into total confusion. While the soldiers were distracted, the wind died down and the water flowed back, drowning the army. Witnessing this great miracle, the people were overcome with awe. Exodus explains, "So Israel saw the great work that the Lord did against the Egyptians. The people feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and his servant Moses." In their elation, they burst into divinely inspired song, praising God for their deliverance and recognizing his supremacy. While Moses led the men in song, Miriam led the women with music and dancing. She took a tambourine and sang, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." This communal celebration showed that the deliverance belonged to the entire nation. The significance of this moment in Israel's story remains central, as observant Jews recite the Song of the Sea almost every morning, and it's a 3,500-year-old creed that has served as a daily reminder of God's power to save. A cornerstone of their prayer liturgy is the verse, "Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, doing wonders?" And yet, there is one verse earlier in our Torah portion that is even more important as a revelation of God's character than his climatic miracle in parting the Red Sea. To understand this, we must look at the full text of Exodus 13:17 through 18. The text says, "When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although that was nearer. For God thought, if the people face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people by the roundabout way of the wilderness bordering the Red Sea." In these verses, it shows that God purposely avoided the direct northern route despite it being the shortest path. He led them instead a roundabout way through the wilderness. The reasoning for this detour is remarkable. Within days, God was about to display his power over everything, sky, sea, and earth, and yet he had no desire to manipulate the Israelites' free will. God understood that even with great miracles before their eyes, the people were still psychologically fragile, and he knew a military skirmish with the Philistines would cause them to retreat. Rather than performing a miracle to fix their fear or bypass their free will, he simply changed their path. He refused to coerce their courage. This highlights a central characteristic of the one true God. He does nothing to alter us. We are free to choose him or free to reject him, and that is the only way the choice is meaningful. He didn't create puppets or robots. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs explains in his commentary, Covenant and Conversations, that worship is not worship if coerced. Virtue is not virtue if we are compelled by inner or outer forces over which we have no control. In crafting humanity, God, as it were, placed himself under a statute of self-limitation. Before I close, I want to name one modern miracle that occurred this week. I always say that Bible Fiber's goal is to tell the story of Israel, both ancient and modern. Well, on January 26th, Israeli soldiers found the body of the last remaining hostage in Gaza. Rani Gavili fell on October 7, 2023, while heroically defending Kibbutz Elomim. Although he was on medical leave at the time, he did not hesitate to join the fight, and he rushed to the front lines to protect his community. For 843 days, his remains were missing, hidden in a cemetery in northern Gaza. It took high-level intelligence and grueling forensic work to finally identify him and bring him home. By a striking coincidence that only God could orchestrate, the very day Ronnie's body was recovered, the Torah reading recounts the moment that Moses fulfilled a similar promise. The incident is in Exodus 13, and it says, Moses took with him the bones of Joseph, who had required a solemn oath of the Israelites, saying, God will surely come to you, and then you must carry my bones with you from here. Just as Moses refused to leave Joseph behind in the soil of Egypt, Israel refused to leave Rani Gavili behind in Gaza. The nation kept its promise to Ron's family, just as it strived to keep its promise to the family of every hostage, whether living or dead. No one got left behind. Now may the nation and the whole region finally find a path to heal. Shabbat Shalom and Am Israel Chai.